Hi there, welcome to the Joyful Shaman podcast. I'm Naomi, your host with the most, and I am welcoming you back to another episode. And this week we are going to be talking about families of origin. Now, I had originally recorded this episode in a very different format, and unfortunately, my family member within my family of origin was in very strong disagreement with what I was stating, as I was just trying to get my thoughts and feelings out there to talk about things I haven't really talked about ever with anybody. So unfortunately, to find peace within myself and within my home, I deleted it. And so I am re-recording this podcast from a still honest perspective, but trying to be mindful of my words. So here we go. So family of origin in shamanic practice is the family that you are born into, or the family that directly raises you if you are adopted. I myself am not adopted. I was born to my mom and dad, Pam and Jorge, in the late 1980s. So 1987, I'm 37 years old. And I also grew up with my grandma in our household, my dad's mom. I have a younger sibling, my sister Laura, who's 2 years younger than me. And from the outside, you could say we had a very loving home, and there is still a lot of love between us. I think the best love that could be possible, given, our experiences, their ways of growing up, their conditioning, their patterns, and the way that I have perceived my childhood and the way my sister perceives her childhood as well. My grandmother, of course, is in spirit now and has been for several years, but the purpose of this episode is to talk about maybe some limiting beliefs, some conditions, some patterns, some things that I have healed and I'm still healing and growing from, for those that may have experienced or are experiencing this within their family dynamic, and the different methods that I use to work with triggers and to find acceptance and wholeness. A lot of times people think that healing is just, we find this overall huge forgiveness and then we absolutely forget it. It's never going to bother us again. It leaves our body, it leaves our mind somehow as if it never happened. And then we're moving forward with our lives. And honestly, that's not my perception of healing. Healing is finding acceptance, is finding forgiveness within yourself, is finding an understanding that despite the things that you perceived that is your truth that happened to you, other people are not going to be in agreement of it, especially family. You can still be able to find peace with it, undo the limiting beliefs, undo the paradigms that have been in your mind because of it and that have impeded you, and reclaim your power so that these events no longer hold power and control you. Now, in my original recording, I did talk about some heavier topics, some very specific things, and unfortunately, someone in my family overheard what I was saying and was really upset about it. And I'm not gonna lie, I was really triggered. I was talking about things I have never recorded, I have never said out loud, thinking, I'm really proud of myself to be able to put my story out there, still putting in mind how they would perceive it if they would hear it, because I do love and respect my family. Fortunately, it was a big misunderstanding, and so to make peace, like I said, I deleted it. And so now I'm just going to share just different aspects of my childhood in relation to spirituality, in relation to shamanism, in relation to what shamans may experience in their childhood, and my deepest wounding. So here I go. I was born in June 1987 to my parents. My mom was 25 years old. I think my dad was 36. They're 11 years apart. I was, of course, the first child. My sister is 2 years younger than me. They had only known each other for about 10 months and, before they got married. And then I came along really soon thereafter, and they didn't know what my gender was. My dad really wanted a boy and ended up with a girl, but he ended up with a girl with a lot of strong masculine energy. So I guess kind of a tomboy. At least that's the way that I was raised as a toddler with my dad. My mom and dad planned for my sister, who came 2 years later. And I grew up, like many Southern people do, in church as well. Religion has played a strong role in my family's upbringing. It was really the basis of where they wanted to instill values and morals within us, specifically in the Christian denomination of the Assemblies of God Church. Both my dad and my mom and my grandma grew up Catholic. My dad being from Yucatan, Mexico, that's in his culture. My mom being from Southern Louisiana, that's part of her culture as well. However, I will say that both my parents were really not devout Catholics, and I wouldn't necessarily say spiritual and having awareness and, you know, maybe practicing a religion as part of their spirituality. But both of my parents were generally quote unquote good people with good morals and values. You know, they treated others with loving compassion and are generous people, and, you know, wanted to just have a good life. So they got married. I came along. My grandma lived with us because both my parents had to work full time. You know, growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. We were, you know, I would say lower middle class. And growing up, my grandma took care of the household because both my parents had to work. She would cook, she would clean, she would make sure my sister and I would do our homework, get our baths, all of those things. Growing up, and I'm just going to say it because it's my honest truth, I don't have a lot of memories of my childhood. So for me, that means that I have experienced some kind of traumatic events in my life that have put my brain into fight or flight mode, my body into fight or flight mode. And so sometimes, you know, the brain will protect you and kind of block out these memories. I do have good memories of my grandpa on my mom's side, and my grandma, her stepmother, you know, and I do have good memories of us traveling as family, having vacations. I do have good memories of, you know, the kids I went to school with, you know, things like that. But there are memories that are really resonant within me that I have worked really hard to heal and find wholeness and acceptance with, that I just want to share as a way to relate of where patterns, conditions, and behaviors can stem from due to our childhood experiences. For me as a toddler, I'm, of course, now as an adult, I know that I'm a very, very strong empath, intuitive person. But as a toddler, I didn't know that. And children, I believe when they are born, all of our minds are wide open. I don't believe that free will really comes until about age 3 or 4, when we can start to make associations of right and wrong and good and bad, and then just start to really observe our parents' behaviors and how they treat us, and how we start to formulate, oh, if I do this, this happens, or if this or they say this to me, then I get this. That doesn't really happen from, you know, being born till like I said, almost 3 or 4 years old, depending on the person. Every person is different. I just remember growing up before my sister came along and I had someone to play with, being just this very reactive girl, creative girl, high energy girl, and spending a lot of time in my room talking to myself. And you know, my parents are just like, oh, we need to, you know, give her a sibling so she can talk to. When in reality, now that I can go back in my meditations and reflect back on childhood memories that get unlocked as I go further in my healing, I was really talking to spirits on the other side. And that's something I didn't touch on in my first episode, was shamans are the intermediaries between the earth, our humanness, people, and the spirit world, where our souls are when we are no longer in physical form, where celestial beings are, where the energy of the creator is. We are that go-between. Shamans are very powerful psychics and mediums, and communicate through ceremony, through ritual, through plant medicine, through a variety of different means, through breath work with spirit, And we all have access to this, but a lot of times people go to these healers to be able to receive some profound shifts and changes and healings, and to activate that, from messages, from support from the other side, if they feel that they do not have the capability or capacity or not in the place to be open to do that. So first foray into shamanism, my, imaginary friends, and maybe that's the case for most kids, are probably just loved ones and spirits on the other side, just checking in and playing, and just, the mind of a child is so open when we arrive. We all arrive we're still in that pure form. And so that's really my first memory of so young, is that. My sister came along, and so, I have a playmate, and we're playing Barbies, and we're playing, house, and we're playing all, typical kids games. And then I start school, kindergarten. And, at the time, unfortunately, this is a big part of my healing, my dad really believed in physical discipline. So much so that it caused a lot of fear within me, and fear that I had until I was probably about 10 years old. After that, my dad wasn't so much, spanking or anything like that, discipline to get me to stop what I was doing. My dad used to use, unfortunately, physical discipline to help reshape fears that I had, or to kind of curb behaviors that they felt were really inappropriate or weren't conducive to being a good girl. And honestly, growing up, I just felt this unhealthy fear about my dad. My grandma was this way. I wouldn't say my mom wasn't so much as a physical disciplinarian, but my mom was more verbally loud, with yelling, with trying to exert authority over me and my sister, that it was just overstimulating, overwhelming. And so I started to repress myself. My mom says a lot, oh, you just hated people. You didn't like to be around people. You were just really quiet and this and that. Well, you learn to be like that if you think that you're going to be physically disciplined, if you exert a behavior that to them is deemed not okay. And I can understand, not being loud in church and things like that, or just, possibly just being overactive and hurting yourself physically. But physical discipline, in my opinion, is just not the way to be able to handle that as an adult now. But that started to really put some limiting beliefs within me. Of course, the way that my grandmother thought, the way that my mother thought, the way that my father thought that we should be raised, and the things that we should say and how we should be, and the Christianity that they tried to instill in us, also led to a lot of really hard beliefs about myself, some really sad beliefs about myself, feeling that I wasn't enough, that there was something wrong with me, that I was different, that I didn't fit in, that I wanted to just be accepted and to be loved as a whole by my family. And I didn't feel that, so I tried to be and mold myself to the best possible version, not just for my family, but with people as a whole, with my friends. Whatever they were into, I was into, even if I didn't know anything about it. Whatever new trend of clothes they were wearing, I wanted to have it because I wanted to fit in so much. And so having physical discipline from age 5 to probably about age 10, and then being told, everything's a sin, this is that, this is the other. And many of you that may relate to religious trauma can be like, I remember that as well. And just growing up in this overly sheltered home, to not be allowed to do certain things, or it was deemed secular or not of the church or whatever, really limited my view and perspective. This is how I feel, and this is my views, and I know that my parents are not going to agree with it. My sister is not going to agree with it, but this is my path of healing it, of acceptance of it, of I no longer live in that. Growing up in my teenage years, it was really hard for me. Unbeknownst to my parents, I developed a hormone condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome, probably since I was 12 years old. But I think it really came to fruition when I was about 15 years old. Of course, we all go through puberty and we're going to have some acne, you know? So my mom saw how much I was struggling with acne, with my self-esteem, and I already had low self-esteem, you know, as a kid. And just, you know, from physical, I was too skinny. Then they put me on medicine to get a little heavier and then got skinny again, you know, to the way that I looked. I didn't look like the other kids in my class. Sometimes I was the only Hispanic girl. I had very indigenous features, loved to spend time in the sun. So I got super brown, which, you know, really brought it out more. And then hitting puberty, you know, you're getting hair everywhere and, you know, it's not light, fine hair. You're getting it on your face, under your arms and your legs. And my dad didn't let me shave my legs. So I was like almost 14 years old. So I was teased mercilessly by the kids in school, which unfortunately is a common occurrence. And I hate to say it, but sometimes a rough part of life. And so I just didn't have a lot of things going for me, I felt, growing up. And then we changed churches. You know, I used to live in Southern Louisiana, was born and raised in Baton Rouge, and then we came to Florida in the late 90s. And the church that we attended was no longer an American church. It was a Spanish church, but still Assemblies of God. And just the cultural change was really hard for me as a teenager. You know, we were raised just very contemporary, and these people did not have those beliefs. My grandma fit in really well because she was amongst Latin people, but me coming from a mother who is white, and my dad at the time was traveling out of the country for long periods of time for his work, not really fitting in yet still. So now from a religious standpoint, a lot of things are not okay. And, you know, people are coming and telling my mom, this is not okay what we're doing. We don't feel this is right. And then us having to reframe to be more accepting of people that honestly, I will say it, I wish my parents would have just stopped going to that church and gone to another church that was more in acceptance. So needless to say, religious trauma, fear of, you know, I will say it, fear of men, fear of physical touch, fear of being too much, fear of not saying the right things, not loving your body, being teased about your body, you know, health issues that led to a lot of high androgens, non-feminizing hormones growing up, just looking and feeling different. You're gonna just feel this overwhelming thing all around me. And putting the fact that I was such a strong empath and unaware of it growing up, you know, made for a recipe for a very, very deep emo child. And I will say that I was a very, very deep emo child. And I so wanted to long to be in a place where I could just feel loved and feel accepted. But I didn't know how to feel that within myself. It wasn't something that I was truly taught. You know, yeah, they say, you know, my parents would say, love yourself, you're perfectly and wonderfully made. But yet, when people are teasing you or people are telling you within your own family, you can't say this, you can't act like this, you can't be like this, is that really loving and accepting you for who you are? I don't think so. And so once I turned 18, once I graduated high school, my dream was to go off to college. I was like, this is it. I get to be away from my family. I get to be away from the church. I get to do whatever it is that I want to do and really find myself. And it was at that point in my life that I started to have an identity crisis. I didn't know who I was. Because I grew up so sheltered, I wasn't allowed to experience certain things. I was told this wasn't, you know, okay with Jesus. It wasn't okay with God. This is not good for you. This is of the world. But yet, how am I supposed to live in the world? And honestly, that's when I started to have these awarenesses of, I don't really resonate with the religious beliefs that they try to instill in me and their version and their fervency of it. You know, I can relate to some of the messaging, you know, underneath, but I still struggled with not finding love and acceptance within my family, and I was still so afraid to be myself. I think that's my deepest wounding that I've had, is I still in my heart long to be loved and accepted by my family. To have them have the capacity and the openness to understand me. That there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not wrong. I'm not going to be who they want me to be. I have to be myself, and to hold that space. I've learned to hold that space for my parents to the best of my ability. I try to hold that space for my sister. But I know that it's not the journey. I know that my soul chose them to be my parents. And probably because my soul knew that they were not going to live up to my expectations in the human form, that they were going to kind of disappoint me. And a lot of times, I'm grateful that I had sufficient love to a certain degree, but it wasn't unconditional love. There was conditions to it. And that's hard to say as an adult. And they're not going to understand that. And so in my 20s, I'm starting to strip away this identity that I thought I was supposed to have, of making my parents proud, doing everything that they want. I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want to make them angry, and I don't want to go to hell and all of this stuff. And that's not my truth. And I lived in Orlando for many years by myself, and I was so grateful, because that was really a turning point in my life. I started to have this massive spiritual awakening. I thought I was going crazy. I was like, who am I? Why am I here? Why do I feel like this? I don't agree with this. They're telling me I need to pray more so things can happen, or, I need to do this, or I need to tithe, or I need to, no, it's about me and what I feel, and being able to have a voice for myself. And so I started to do a lot of different things that, of course, they were not in agreement with. Growing up, I wasn't allowed to date. And I started dating this guy when I was 18. He was my first boyfriend. And he's happily married with a wonderful wife and children. And my dad was like, I prohibit you. And I was like, you made all these rules that we had to follow, and now I'm of age, and you're still trying to control me. So it was a matter of control because of fear. I started to realize in my 20s that I felt that my parents were very fear-based people, that they didn't have a lot of belief in themselves, that they could accomplish things, that they had to work so hard, physically, mentally, emotionally, and rely on other people, or just believe that nothing was capable, or it was just so far out of their reach that could never be their reality, and tried to push a little bit of that on me. I started dating a guy when I was 24, living in Orlando, wonderful person, just didn't work out. And that was the first time that I had to experience friendships and relationships. Living in Orlando, making friends with all the different people. I used to have a corporate job working in luxury hotels. All these different cultural backgrounds, all these different beliefs, all these different perspectives I had never been around. They were sheltered. They sheltered me from that. So then having all of this exposure, and unbeknownst to me, having this profound spiritual awakening, led to me having almost a complete breakdown. I went and sought help with a counselor that misdiagnosed me with bipolar disorder. And so I held on to that belief system of this is me. I have bipolar depression. My mood is unstable, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, my health condition, polycystic ovarian syndrome, was amplifying. I was gaining weight. My mood was just unstable, just other physical things happening in my body. So I'm creating more stories, more things based on childhood conditioning that were not serving me. It was through that moment of counseling in my early 20s, the first time, that I was really able to start to separate myself from my family dynamic. And at times I have gone back to that. It was mainly in my 20s, but now I have fully separated myself from my family dynamic. And I can now have the awareness of who my parents are. Does that part of me still long to still have the mom that was nurturing, that was protective, that didn't let things happen to me? Yeah. Do I wish I had a dad that was more emotionally open and more willing to trust and try to understand me? Yeah. Do I wish both my parents would just accept me as I am, and that there's nothing wrong with being creative? There's nothing wrong with being loud. There's nothing wrong for talking. There's nothing wrong for being direct with your communication. Yeah, absolutely. We're all going to desire the aspects of our family members, especially if there was a lot of love there, and even more so if there wasn't a lot of love there within us. That's inner child healing. That's the true essence of ourselves. And that's the journey that we go through in adulthood, is really undoing a lot of this because they tried the best that they could with what they know how. And that's something that I have to tell myself every day, especially when I interact with them, that they tried their best and that our soul chose them for a reason. And maybe our soul knew that we were going to have these experiences, and it's part of our purpose to master love and to find forgiveness and to find acceptance, and then to, as part of our journey, undo things and recalibrate our mind to truly create the identity, the paradigm, the story that we want to live in at any point in time. That's part of my wounding as a shamanic healer. That's something that I still work on. So my family of origin, sure, they're loving people. Can I connect with them now? No. The deeper and deeper I go into my journey, the more and more awareness that I have, the more that I can see that my parents are not, they're never going to fulfill that. That was never their purpose or the expectation or anything. And so I'm releasing that. But I can also see my parents as extremely fallible people. And more than anything, I hope that they heal for themselves, that they go on their journey, even though they are in their golden years. But for me, I have found peace with it. I have found and accept that they will never accept me. That they will not have unconditional love. And most people cannot. There will be conditions to love. I feel that only God, only universe, only source, only creator has the capacity for unconditional love. But I can thank my parents for, number one, bringing me physically into the earth so I can fulfill my purpose. But I also recognize that your family of origin, although they be blood, they don't have to stay attached to you, and you don't have to attach yourself to them. And that's been my greatest healing, that I can detach myself from them. And then I can choose what I call my soul family. The people that I know, that I can trust, that will hold space for me, that can understand me, that will love me no matter what, and not judge me, and not try to control me, or not try to manipulate me in any way, shape, or form. Now that soul family, that takes time to find. And that's through our different life experiences, that those people that we need for whatever seasons, however long in our life, come. And it's just this special bond and this connection. You can say it's kind of like a soulmate relationship. But your souls communicate with one another. And on a soul level, you can understand. So, family of origins. We're all going to go through a fucked up childhood. I just feel like that's just the rite of passage as part of the human experience. From childhood till you're a young adult out in the world on your own, no matter if everything was hunky-dory, leave it to beaverish, there's still some fucked up shit that happened. But it's until you start to experience things and you start to recognize and come into the awareness of your behaviors and how you react to things, how you cope to things of like, ooh, that may not be healthy, or why am I feeling like this? Where is this coming from? And we take pause in stillness to analyze and think about it. That's when we can start to become crystal clear aware. Okay, this started from this, or this started from that, or this came from this. And let me go to the root of that. And what do I need to feel? What do I need to heal? What do I need to find forgiveness within myself and for that person, if possible? How do I find acceptance and wholeness within this? How do I integrate that this happened to me, but it's not who I am? In shamanism, we use different techniques, meditation, breath work, the energy healing rituals that we do for ourselves to open the mind, to go from conscious to subconscious and rewire our brains as many times as we need to. We're always going to get triggered. Sometimes we have to go through these experiences to take a pause and say, why am I being triggered? Yes, this is still a wounding for me. Say it's okay to feel what we're feeling. There's nothing wrong with that. Express ourselves in the best way possible, but sometimes it's not possible. Forgive ourselves and keep moving forward. But you are no longer living in that. I just want you to know that. You don't have to let your family and those dynamics and those things and those stories and those experiences take power away from you. You can reclaim your power. You can say enough is enough. I'm going to heal this. I'm going to release this. I'm going to reframe this. I'm going to shift this. And I'm going to keep living my life with love, with acceptance, with wholeness. No matter what they say, no matter what they do, I will still try to find love and hold space for them. But I'm going to keep being me because I'm fucking amazing. And honestly, we as children of our parents are mirrors for them. And they don't like that. They don't like seeing maybe the parts that they don't really love about themselves, or they wish they could change, or they wish things were different, and we amplify that. Same thing if I don't have any children. I'm just someone's child. But if I had children, those children would amplify those parts that I needed to heal about myself. So whenever you feel a projection, whenever you feel hurt, just take a pause, sit with it, feel it. But no, that's not the truth. You know your truth. And sometimes you just have to stop and say, no, that's enough. I know my truth. I know my way forward. I know I can heal this. And this may continue to be a trigger for me, but it's not going to take control of me. I don't live in this paradigm. I don't live in this reality anymore. I create the reality. I tell myself what it is and who I am. And there's power in that. And maybe that's what our parents may be afraid of, because they see us take power in ways that they feel that they can't. I hope this message resonated with those that find it. The next episode, I'm going to talk a little bit more about 20s and my 30s having a greater awakening and coming into my intuitive abilities and the story behind that. I want to thank you for following along with this episode. And I want to thank you for supporting me in the Joyful Shaman podcast. Whether you're watching this a video on YouTube or hearing this on an Audible platform, I hope that you know that you are loved, that you are supported, that there is a purpose and a plan for you. And believe in who you are and believe in your light and your magic. Because you came here for a reason. And And maybe I'm just a person to help shine a light that's already within you to bring it out even more. If you liked what you heard today or what you saw today, please like, follow, and share this. Share it with a friend that needs a message of hope during this time. And until we meet again, be well. Sat Nam, friend.